Okay, I'm seeing that we're live on YouTube and recording. So we good to go, Mr. Cross?
Yes, Chair Edens, we are good to go. Thank you.
Excellent. Today is June 22nd, and I'd like to call the Economic Development meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. Good afternoon. Can we have the roll called, please?
Sure. Chair Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Flashar,
Here.
Councilmember Galani,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxie,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon, and Councilmember Ottenberg. Okay, I will watch for their arrival.
Thank you very much. All right, can I get an approval for the minutes and a motion? Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Clark. Any discussion or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Minutes are approved. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to comment tonight?
I am not seeing anyone, Chair.
Okay. And I see we've got one alumni on here. Welcome to Councilmember Bertolino as well. We're happy to have you join us. So we really tonight, when I talked to City Administrator Cross about what this was going to, Councilmember Ottenberg needs the link resent for the meeting, it sounds like. So if you would take care of that, Mr. Cross. When Steve and I talked about what this meeting would look like, we kind of decided to do two things. Is one, let the committee know what was continually being handled so that you would know what was not going to fall through the cracks, given the understanding that Steve cannot clone himself and do exactly everything Julian was doing while that position's vacant. And the second thing is to talk about, where we go forward from here and what that position description would look like and what the hiring practice would look like as well. So it occurred to me that when we talk about the word economic development, or the phrase rather, that we might be using different functioning definitions. And I was hoping Scott and Deb would be on here as well for this. But the reason why it's important is in how we advertise for the job and exactly where we want to go in the future. And so what I thought we would just do briefly to make sure that we're speaking the same language, and Teresa's already had to do this, and so has Rob in the certificate program. But if we could briefly go around and just state what we hear or what we think of when we hear the word economic development, and then what your idea for the future is, and I can also share, what's a literal textbook definition. The reason why I wanted to do that is because it's been my experience, either talking with constituents or other council members, for example, that when someone hears the word development, they think just of, storefronts and concrete. So I want to make sure I understand what the comments are really directed towards tonight to help facilitate this discussion. So I'll start with Councilmember Clark. We're going to go Hollywood Square style on my screen.
Well, I suppose this is not my forte, but I would break it down into the economic part is just got to do with how we our finances and how we get money to do things that we want to do. And part of that is how we develop our city around us and the structure of the city. And so that would be the development part. When I think about the person who is doing that, it's a little different. It's about the person would be getting the team together and putting together a plan in place so that we have something to follow and help them out in bringing more businesses in and supporting those businesses, maintaining them. For example, in the COVID, I'm sorry to take up time, but during the COVID time, we lost a few businesses. And to look back at that and to use that for going forward. in the plan. So we look at what went right, what went wrong, and build on that for the future. And I think that, we learned a lot from Julian in the way he did it. And he had a very strategic way of doing his job. So I think if we just look at how he did it, that's pretty much what I think of an economic development manager.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Jaxie, what do you hear when you hear the phrase economic development?
So, of course, I would echo much of what Teresa said. I would say that, when we attended the economic development course that we all attended recently, I was personally surprised. I never really put any thought into economic development, just to be completely honest. And so I was surprised that not every city even has an economic development manager. I was pleasantly surprised that we do, obviously, or that we did with Julian. Certainly one of the things that pops to mind is that engagement with businesses, not just with the businesses that are here and retaining them, but also with the recruiting, right? In the sense of trying to reach out to various organizations around the area, do some networking, encourage business owners to see what Wildwood has to offer. So it's really a little bit of salesmanship as well about what we have to offer. And then finally, I would echo like Teresa said, that the development of streams of revenue that could be brought, to the city as well that maybe we didn't think about. So that's where I'm at. And I couldn't agree more with Teresa. I thought Julian did a fine job. And so something like his skill set, something like his mentality is what I'd like to see.
Councilmember Dodball, thanks. Thanks, Rob.
Well, everything that everybody's said so far is where I would want to go too. But I think one of the missing pieces that I've seen since I've been involved with economic development as a committee, I didn't have the opportunity like Dave Bertolino did to kind of run that show a little bit as an ad hoc committee for the council. We did that for a little while. But when we hired Julian, I was on the committee that hired or recommended, not hired, but we did interviews, et cetera. And we need somebody who can sell the benefits of Wildwood. And I also think we need to look, which I was looking very forward to, our next 5-year plan. We need to encourage the development of businesses of all types. Retail, I think we need some professionals in town so that we can support the restaurants and some of the retail businesses we have during the daytime. We need to identify and promote any service industries that we've got. And we need to retain those existing businesses. And I think Julian was doing an excellent job with retaining them. When he first got hired, we held a meeting with a lot of the businesses here in town just to introduce him. And all of the businesses were completely shocked that we had chosen to have an individual dedicated to help support those businesses. And by support, I don't mean doing their business, but having the ability to help put the right people together in the right situations. So I think we need somebody that can have a very collaborative skill set along with a sales skill set to sell the city benefits, as well as the existing businesses relationship building. I think by having the economic development manager, we were able to get our local businesses to feel like somebody was listening to them. We heard that a lot prior to hiring Julian, that I don't really know what I'm supposed to do if I start a business here in town. So he did a great job of putting together all of those pieces for various businesses to grab off the internet in many cases and then follow up with him. So we got to have a people person.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Dodwell. Councilmember Galani, what you hear when you hear economic development and kind of where you want to see this go.
I feel cheated. There's too many people that have gone before me.
No, that's okay, because what you don't know is the buzzwords. I'm tallying the number of times I've heard the same word so that we
Yeah.
have a
Good.
list. So if you want to repeat things, now's the time to do
well,
it.
I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I mean, obviously everything that the three previous council members have said, I would echo. But I think, without getting into the weeds too deep, I think it's a relatively simple concept of maintaining the businesses that we have here, keeping them happy, keeping them excited about being here, and helping them figure out ways to grow and develop their businesses and expand. My dog just heard that bark and is about to start barking too. And then also trying to figure out ways to attract new innovative businesses to the city. Types of businesses that we would like to have here that we might not have, other businesses that we already enjoy, and just create an attractive environment for folks to want to invest into the city and start and grow a business, which is also going to attract folks to move here and live here, and help build our resident base. And then also to figure out different ways to generate revenue for the city, by alternative means outside of taxation, I would say, although that might be an option. But regardless, just ways for the city to continue to grow economically and by population, which indirectly will also supplement that. So, it's pretty simple concept, I would say.
Thank you. Councilmember Flasher.
Hi, thanks. Some words stuck out to me as I was listening to everybody else talk, and these are the ones that kind of grab my attention when thinking of economic development now. The salesman thing is big. I think we need someone that is an advocate in general for Wildwood and is really pushing Wildwood as a whole, bringing in new businesses. I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of what Julian did. I just know that everybody was really happy with everything that he did do. I don't know if he's recruiting businesses or he is just a support system when a business comes here and gives them all the information they need. But to me, we need someone that is recruiting as well as selling Wildwood when we're reached out to and things like that. I think it's important to have someone that's plugged into our area, whether they just have knowledge of Wildwood in general. I'm not saying we have to get an internal person, but it would be nice to have someone that's somewhat local and knows Wildwood to some degree. That's my opinion. And then the streams of revenue. I mean, any sort of stream of revenue is welcomed. That's basically what I wrote down. I mean, advocate for growth in our city in general. I think we have kind of a niche as far as our businesses, and everything seems to kind of be similar molds. It'd be nice to kind of see that expand a little bit and have, I'm not saying we have to get big businesses, but big businesses wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in Wildwood, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Flasher. Councilmember Ottenberg.
Thank you. So some of the things that were touched on earlier, I would agree with. We need somebody that can sell Wildwood, but just as importantly, we need to have somebody that understands Wildwood's competitors. For example, what is it about Ellisville? What is it about Baldwin? What is it about Chesterfield that might make a potential business decide on one of those cities as an opening location? What are they doing possibly that we aren't doing here? So if we get a lead on someone who's considering Wildwood to open a business, if they choose one of those other cities, we need to understand why they're choosing one of those other cities. Are they being offered a financial incentive? Are those other cities maybe doing more to court that potential business? So I think it's not only important to sell Wildwood as a place to locate a business, but I think somebody alluded to it earlier. We also need not just a salesperson, but almost more of an account manager, for lack of a better term, somebody that's going to take that person, once he decides to locate a business here, and then basically walk arm in arm with him through the whole process of getting that business opened up. Because that's one of the major frustrations I hear from people that are trying to start a business is, I don't know where to begin. It's a nightmare to try to get to the right people. It's a nightmare to get the approvals, the permits, etc. So I think that's important. And then when it comes to revenue streams, just as it's important to find new business opportunities, new businesses for Wildwood, I think we need to do maybe a little bit better job of marketing Wildwood to people who may want to potentially move here, new residents and so on, and give them reasons to choose Wildwood versus Chesterfield versus Clarkson Valley versus some other place as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ottenberg. So here's my plan. So I want to give staff a chance to talk, but I also want to recap this and then transition so that Steve can introduce with what his vision is as well, and basically introduce the agenda item. So real quick, I just want to recap. So we just did a lot of our discussion beforehand, so this should be a much easier transition to talk about the document now. So I heard the word revenue 4 times, sales 4 times, which is pretty much everybody. Recruit 5 times, support twice, retain 3 times, growth and development once, regional understanding / understanding of a resident base as well. And we also had facilitator used, which I think is also akin to support as well. So it looks like Deb just said she's having trouble with her video and audio. And we have someone that is now wanting to public comment. So after we do this recap, I'll ask if it's okay for us to go back into public commenting. So we'll need a motion to do that for the agenda order. So hang on there, Mr. Bosworth, for just a second. And so the other thing I wanted to do was there's what Wildwood can use as economic development, and then there's different ideas of what a textbook definition is. And there's books just arguing and theses just arguing what development is, as it's just even a functional basic definition. And that definition changes every really 20 years. But the biggest thing I wanted to share with you is, the quote, economic development does not automatically equal economic growth. Here's a 3-part definition of sustainable, and the key word is sustainable. So Katie touched on that when she said we need to have a center population that can support those restaurants and those businesses during the day. So that's an example of sustainability and growth in town center. So this definition is local economic development is achieved when a community's standard of living can be preserved and increased through a process of human and physical development that is based on principles of equity and sustainability. Economic development establishes a minimum standard of living for all and increases the standard over time. Second, economic development reduces inequality. And third, it promotes and encourages sustainable resource use and production. So when we talked about that, we talked about businesses today, but you can argue with a functional definition that's broader than that. When the area passed the recent proposition for the community college, that's an investment in the workforce, and workforce development is a type of social capital, which is actually economic development. So I just wanted to challenge us to think a little bit broader today in recruiting someone that doesn't just do business relationships, but thinks about development in terms that's a little bit broader. And one of the struggles that we're going to have as we define our community is, do we just want to be a bedroom community? And if we do, what does that look like versus bringing in more of that kind of office type group? So let's do this. Can I get a motion to, or we can do this without, if no one takes exception, I'd like to open public commenting back up since we have a member of the public. So if there's no objections, and then we'll come back and I'll ask Mr. Vunich and Carla if they would want to share their definition, and then turn it over to Steve for his and to introduce. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, so Tony Bosworth, it looks like he's on the line, and I think we need to give him audio.
Chair, I am promoting him to a panelist. He should be joining us here shortly.
And I believe the city's policy is usually a 5-minute limit, but you're also the only one commenting, so.
And I'm also promoting Councilmember McCutcheon.
Great.
So she should be joining us here momentarily. Okay, Chair Edens, Councilmember McCutcheon is now a panelist, and Mr. Bosworth is on the line as well, or should be.
You're good to go.
Okay, I don't know if you want my comments or not, if it's okay. I knew this was going on this evening, and I just wanted to really just make one comment. One of the things that Julian was really good about was reaching out to everybody in the brokerage community, everybody throughout St. Louis, particularly in the brokerage community, and a lot of tenants I would cold call on. Excuse me. We're aware of Julian.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to lay down some ground rules here, Chair Edens. As long as we are talking generally about the position and we do not speak about an individual specifically about pros or cons or what that individual did or did not do, we can remain in open session. As soon as we start talking about an individual and their job performance, we need to go into closed session. That's why I asked John Young to join us on this call to make sure that we don't violate those rules. So we need to be careful and only speak about the position generally, not an individual specifically. And John,
Include a member of the public, though? I know that that's our governing rules. I was just wondering if that includes a member of the public.
John Young, if he'd like to come in, and I just want to make sure I'm trying to state the way John and I spoke about how tonight's meeting could go. So Chair, with your permission, we'll ask Mr. Young to make sure we are following the ground rules properly.
Yeah, the comment was really more directed to a discussion by the council members regarding personal information about an employee, whether it be current or former. But in terms of the impressions of a member of the public, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. So just for council members, let's keep in mind what Mr. Cross said, but Mr. Bosworth, you're free to continue, sounds like.
Okay, thank you. I just, I found his sales qualities to be pretty valuable to Wildwood and the position in general. As some of the long-term members on this board will be aware, Wildwood had 7 years ago, had a huge hurdle, actually as recently as 2016, in that the St. Louis MSA did not, as far as developers and brokers, et cetera, didn't view Wildwood as very positive. And the person going forward and the qualities that have been in that position to date, from the time that that position was filled, I think benefited greatly from the outreach, comparing it to the EDC person in even Chesterfield, which has a lot going on. They probably take a lot more calls in than that position in Wildwood would ever take going out. But Manchester, for instance, is probably similar size in population and somewhat limited in size in developable area. But I think the position is important to have somebody that's not just good at the administrative and the quotational or the dictatorial part of the position, but somebody that really has a good sales head on their shoulders and doesn't hesitate to pick up that phone to get over the hurdles that Wildwood, in my opinion, has done very well in getting over the last 5 to 7 years. Mr. Village and I have spoken about that numerous times over the last 15 years. And I think bringing that EDC position did a lot for the city. And I think the person who was in it did a good job. And to get that sales side of it is important. And Ms. Edens, as you had just pointed out, getting that daytime traffic, and I think that's a huge importance to the city. But those are really my general comments. I just, if you were able to gain those qualities in a person going forward, I think those are, I think you've been demonstrated by the person that's been in that position to be strong in the sales side of it. And that encompasses everything that everybody said in the last half an hour, particularly as it relates to staying in communication with the existing businesses, reaching out to the St. Louis MSA as a whole, and participating in the state things, and the shopping center convention stuff. Those things are all very important, I think, to our community as a whole, to continue the growth that we've been fortunate enough to see for the last 5 years during a pretty difficult economic time, to be honest. So those are my comments. I just wanted to briefly make those comments that I thought those were pretty valuable traits that have paid off in the last 5 years.
Well, I think this committee really appreciates it. We never want to assume what the community needs, and so your comments were valuable, and thank you for taking the time to be on here tonight. Did anybody else join that wants to comment?
No, Chair, there is no one else.
Okay, all right. Seeing no one else, we'll go back to the discussion. Councilmember McCutcheon, I don't know if you heard a little bit of what we were doing before, but we were just very briefly saying what we hear when we hear the word economic development to make sure that we're functioning from the same definition tonight, or fairly close to it. Would you like to share? No? Or I can't tell if it's okay, nod no again if it's your microphone.
Yeah, no, I don't. If you can just quickly go over what the common definition of economic development is, I'd appreciate that.
Well, this council repeated revenue, sales, recruiting, supporting, retaining, growth and development, increase in resident base, and someone with a regional understanding, both larger and micro scale in terms of Wildwood. And then there was also more of a textbook definition that expands economic development to social capital as well, and increasing quality of life. So not just in terms of storefront. So development and growth are not necessarily the same thing. They can be, but they're not necessarily. So economic development is kind of more than just box stores. Okay, so with that, Director Vunich, would you like to kind of share what your vision is as well? Or no pressure from staff members, but I'd love to hear your opinion. But what do you hear when you hear economic development?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I think the position is best served when that individual, whether it's a he or she, acts as the conduit to take interest from outside and inside Wildwood and get it to the right people inside City Hall, so that we're all working together in unison and reducing delays, improving relationships, and in the end, getting businesses open and retained in the city. Thank you.
Similar definition, but with the efficiency of someone with a staff perspective. Carla, if you'd like to share, you can as well.
A lot of it's been said, but certainly they're going to be the advocate for the city's benefits and the city's profile, marketing the city benefits, both residential, business. I would add communications across the board, including social media, which is such a strong method to get messages across now. Just the business point person. A history of showing a successful sales kind of personality, and an expert on the city and all of its value. to others. Kind of similar to what a lot of people have said.
Thank you. Okay, so now, last but not least, is Mr. Cross, who is going to share his opinion and introduce the item, and then we'll open it up for discussion after that. But it's good to know what was said frequently.
Thank you, Chair Edens. There's a couple things that we can talk about concurrently here. In the agenda, I included a copy of a job description that goes back 5 years and has been recently edited by the previous occupant of that position. I also shared with you all by email earlier this afternoon a real rough summary, a bullet point summary, if you will, of that position, kind of as I envision it, a little bit retooled. So keep those two documents in mind as I go forward with how I envision this position. The things that you all have said are all very, very true. Each one of you hit on a point that is applicable and necessary in this position, from being a salesperson to having knowledge of Wildwood, to reaching out. In particular, this person in that position definitely is a traffic cop, if you will, who is helpful to new businesses coming to the city, or businesses that are currently operating within the city that want to make changes, and getting those persons, helping those persons overcome the hurdles to, as I said, come to the city or stay in the city or expand in the city, and getting that business owner to the right people within the city, be it the planning department, the permitting department, the public works department, the city administrator, whoever that might be. That person sitting in that position is instrumental in making sure that if that person is the point person for businesses and they know to reach out and say, I need help with this, that person gets them to the right person on city staff as quickly as they can. That person is a communication specialist, and there's many forms in which to do that, reaching out directly to businesses or through social media, which is pretty much the way a lot of things are communicated today. That does not take the place of the personal touch. And that's one thing that is important, that personal touch with the businesses, so they know they have an advocate here. That is absolutely important. So I agree with that, but I do see expanding this position to take on some other roles as it relates to the communication side of the house. We have staff here that are doing jobs that really are not part of their job, and I see this role. And if you looked at the document I sent out earlier today, it was a long title, but it was just a trying to encapsulate a business, an economic development, a communications coordinator, somebody who is doing wears many hats, as we all do here at the city. So economic development, Chair Edens, when you asked how people define it, it depends on what city you're in. Quite honestly, economic development in the city of Wildwood is far different than economic development in Ellisville or economic development in St. Charles. So we as a city, the entire council and the mayor, we all need to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what does the city of Wildwood consider to be economic development. I will tell you that the prior holder of that position was quite frustrated on many occasions because we did not do economic development in the true sense of the word. There are certain roadblocks, there are certain impediments to businesses trying to come to the city of Wildwood, and that is a source of frustration for any true economic development individual, because there are things that right now there are forces that are preventing us from expanding in certain areas. That's just a fact of life. So we have to decide what we want to allow within the city, because it makes no sense for me to end up hiring an individual that I can't, that their hands are tied at the very, very beginning. So that's just just kind of a summary of my vision for that position as it moves forward, helping the city to retain existing businesses, attract businesses, and helping our businesses accomplish their ultimate goals. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so my understanding from talking with you is that you're looking for some sort of motion tonight that contains direction about what the application requirement should look like. Is that correct?
Well, Chair, this is what I am doing at this point. Is I'm seeking input, and I very much appreciate the input from every one of you all. I'm going to go back and ultimately listen to this video and write down all the salient points. I'm going to do the same type of thing with the Admin and PW Committee in early September, and I'm going to ask input from them. I've already sought input from others within the elected and appointed and other officials in the city, and have gotten feedback from them. I'm also going to reach out to some of my counterparts later this week in terms of how they are handling this role in their city. So I'm gathering a whole lot of information right now to decide to see where we go, and then ultimately come back with a summary of my findings in terms of what the general consensus is throughout the city of Wildwood in terms of what folks might be looking for.
But okay, so you're just looking for feedback, but not a specific motion as a recommendation from the committee.
Not a recommendation tonight. I wanted to get the feedback, which is, as I say, very helpful. I'll need to go back and, as I say, re-listen and write that down. But for tonight's meeting, it was just a discussion just to understand what this particular committee sees in that role. And as I say, your feedback is tremendously helpful for me.
Okay.
And very much appreciated.
All right. Well, I'm glad to know we're still on track, and I've got Katie on the list, but I would also share too that I would support if you wanted to add the social media posts and the Gazette to the job description, simply because there is so much overlap and you can be more responsive and quicker for promoting businesses. I think that it gives a little bit more flexibility and for timeliness purposes. I would still, however, keep the original job description duties, in my opinion, because there will continue to be future development and more pressures. And we want to make sure that we have someone trained in how to balance incentives with the needs of the community, and not someone that perhaps is less familiar with that because they just act as a business liaison. So I want it to be more than just a communications position. So I support what's on your list. I just want to keep Julian's as well. So I've got Councilmember Dodwell, and then I believe it was Councilmember Jaxie, and then Ms. McCutcheon, but did I get that backwards? Okay, and Councilmember Clark, I looked at the little button on the screen and I missed your hand. Do you know where you were in that list?
You can put me at the end of the list. I'm good with that.
Okay, best for last, heading up the rear. All right, Councilmember Dodwell, thank you.
Steve, I understand where you're coming from in that having the social media interaction with the economic development person would be great. But I think we as a city have been struggling for a long, long time. And we've been getting closer to that point where we have parks, we have services that we're providing to our residents, and we have a limited tax base because we don't do a lot of the other types of taxes that we can tax our residents on. And my understanding of the goal for the economic development position was to better broaden our horizons as a profitable city. I'm not saying we have to make tons and tons of money, but have enough ability to support all the activities and the park systems and the services we want to provide our residents, we're going to need businesses beyond just a few retail stores and a couple of restaurants in the city of Wildwood in order to do that. And in the past years, I think it's been very difficult for Julian, as you had mentioned, I'll use the name, the previous individual in the position, to be able to go out and really market to those kinds of businesses. And I think I'm not expecting the city of Wildwood to look like Clayton with 20, 30-foot high rises in the middle of Clayton. But I really think that we as a city have to have some professionals and some satellite offices, whatever you can come up with, in the core of the town center area that we had designed to be able to support both the retail establishments, the restaurant establishments, and the service organizations that we have here in the city. We have to have additional businesses coming into town that aren't that type of business. And I'm just concerned that what you've got listed here, and I don't mean anything negative by it at all, but on item number 2 and item number 3, I'm hoping that the economic development manager would be the guide over what the content needs to be in those documents and assist with preparing said documents. But I think we need to look at some of our other staff to help support, or hire an additional person or a part-time person to help do the layout of the Gazette. I mean, being a graphic artist to put together the Gazette is a different job than being an economic development person. So that's just my 2 cents.
Ms. Dowell, I appreciate those comments, and you're absolutely right on pretty much everything that you said. So with regard, okay, when I laid things out, when I say oversee the preparation of the Gazette, yes, we have Megan. So in involvement was Megan, myself, Joe Vunich, there were several people in terms of providing content, and then in terms of the review was pretty much Megan, myself, and Travis. But this person being involved and as part of the communication side of that person, that's what I said. But no, not laying it out or something like that. The social media part, I still think is hand in hand with this person being a communications point of communications for the city. You also hit the nail on the head when you mentioned about the city needing additional sources of revenue. As you all know, we are a pool tax city. So 50% of our revenues come from the pool tax. Simply that we get, the 1% pool tax that Chesterfield, that Wildwood, and other cities that are part of the pool tax and not a point of sale city such as Ellisville, we share in that, and that's the bulk of our revenues. But you'll all also remember, and Ms. Dodwell, you were alluding to this, of our 8 strategic goals, number 2 is expanding our financial base. And part of that would be from an economic development standpoint, but a much larger and more impactful is a change in our tax base through a parks and stormwater tax, through a property tax, through other means such that which are going to be much larger than bringing an additional business or 2 or 10 to the city. Very important. That's why, again, expanding our revenue stream and having a revenue stream that's going to be there for a long time to come is going to require some bigger issues to deal with, which is why that's number 2 out of 8, ahead of erosion, quite honestly. But everything that you said is absolutely true, and I agree with you. I just didn't perhaps say it quite as succinctly as you did, but I just see this position doing the things that we've all talked about here, but also taking on the communications piece. And I threw the Gazette in because that is a communication piece, which is very, very important to our 35,517 residents are, as the recent census said, 35,417 residents. Apparently we lost 100 residents, so they say.
I
But
I
find
don't
that
know
hard
how
to
we
believe.
did that.
I
Yeah.
don't know either. But thank you for the comments, so I appreciate them.
Okay, we've got Councilmember Jaxie, Councilmember McCutcheon, Councilmember Clark. Jaxie, you're up.
Yeah, I'll try and stay very brief. 2 quick points for you, Steve. The first one, I tend to hesitate to grow staffs. It's just something that I've always disliked doing as a leader unless it was necessary. So I say that to say, if we believe we have a need for additional communications, better communications, etc., I just would challenge you to continue to think about how great is that need? Does that need actually require maybe a communications director, a public affairs officer, whatever term we want to apply to it, as opposed to part-timing a position, 2 different directions. If it doesn't warrant that level of effort, then yeah, I could support allowing a position or supporting a position to maybe take on a couple of extra additional duties so as to, not grow the staff. But it's that balance, right? That balance between, do we need an arborist in the city of Wildwood? Yeah, probably so. I mean, we're like the city of trees kind of deal. So I don't know. I just would encourage you, continue to assess that amount of work and be ready to come back at some point, maybe with a recommendation of a public affairs position or communications director, whatever you want to call it, if that work so warrants. And then the second thought that I wanted to share real quick, after other people were providing their definitions, I just wanted to provide one additional thought. In the last 2 months or so, one of the programs or projects that this committee's been working on has been the and forgive me if I get this wrong, the bicycle program, basically. I think you understand what I mean when I say it, or you know what I'm talking about. I bring it up because one of the things that brings to mind for me, for an economic development director or whatever we call the position, is that person that aligns businesses. That old statement of a rising tide, rises all boats, or whatever that is, something like the saying. That's one other thing that I see this position doing, right? Is aligning our businesses, helping our businesses to coordinate with each other. They're always focused on their bottom lines, or I assume that many of them are focused on their bottom lines and not realizing that when they work together, all of their bottom lines can go up. So I see this position also as something, Steve, that can help bring programs together that bring Wildwood businesses together and align them so that everyone benefits from it. Just thought I'd add that one more item to your list of stuff to have to muddle through. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Jaxie. In a little bit, we'll transition into some regional coordination with an update from West St. Louis Chamber of Commerce, but not quite yet. Hold your horses. Councilmember McCutcheon, you're up.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Mr. Jaxie just said. My comment was, I think we probably need a separate position for communications or public affairs. I think it would serve the city in many different ways. I think the staff is probably has way too much on their plates. I know it's a good thing probably to keep a small staff, but it's also a good thing to support our staff and to lessen the load when we can and when it's needed. And then my other question is for you, Steve. I was curious when you said that the former economic development director had impediments up front. Can you be a little bit more specific about that?
Yes, Councilmember McCutcheon. What I was alluding to is that there are certain types of businesses that the city has not encouraged to be developed here in town. And so the economic development manager, who is trying to perhaps court some of those businesses and others like that, when that person would be speaking with businesses and they'd want to come here and say, well, that's not going to get through because of this issue or that issue or that zoning requirement or and so forth. So I was just kind of indicating that there have been certain instances where some businesses have not been necessarily able to do business in the city of Wildwood.
I can also add to that real quick too. I know I had several discussions with local business owners and with the former position holder as well. Some of our retail or office space is managed by, kind of an out-of-state or a national group that has the benefit of not really being emotionally invested in a community and often can take write-offs and is concerned about their bottom line. So we did have some local businesses that wanted to stay or expand. And when they would go to renew their lease, the price per square foot would increase drastically and actually price them out of the market. And the odd thing is the managing group would have rather had a vacancy, which is what they ended up with, rather than a continual leaser. And that's something nobody in this position and you and I can't fix. And it's really unfortunate. And I wish it was different, but it has caused recent stress on local businesses. I don't want to say which one in particular that happened recently. But that has been a continual problem, is that they would rather increase the rate maybe after 10 years and have a vacancy if you say no, than work with a local business that runs a really tight line. So I'd like to add that, but please continue with your comments. You're on mute, Councilmember McCutcheon.
That's all my comments. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Chair Edens. Yeah, we've talked about what we, and this, Katie alluded to this, that we talked about what we know our past, we know what happened in the past, we know where we're at right now, and but the future, we talk about it in such a general term that it's a little bit hard to visualize, to get that picture in my head. What in 10 years do we want our city to look like? So if we had like this picture that we could come up with, even if it's a written one that we can visualize, that depicts what is it that we want to be. Do we want to be a place with a big business or many, many small businesses, or a place where young people come and hang out in the evenings? I just, I'm trying to put this together with all the generality. We need revenue sources and increased communication, increased financial base. Is it a big business or small business? And I think I know what we're going toward, but before we ask somebody to come in and be the manager of this development or the economic development, do we have something to tell them, this is what we want to grow to be? Where are we going? If we don't know, it's like Alice in Wonderland. She gets to the crossroads and the Cheshire Cat's there, and she says, which way do I go? And he says, well, where do you want to end up? She says, I don't know. So he said, well, it doesn't matter. So that's where I'm going with that. Do we know which direction we want to go in? I think we do, but we need to be able to tell the people coming in and applying for the job. And as far as hiring more people, I guess from my perspective, I would throw that all back to Steve and to his team, because I would think they would know more about who they need than we would know. And I don't know if there's a protocol for that, if it starts from them or if it starts from us, but I would think that it would start from the staff. That's all.
So what we need that magical person that is both an arborist and a graphic designer that specializes in communication. I'm sure there will be many, many applicants with that entire skill set, right, Steve?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so I will kind of close it up because I don't see any more hands. I think we gave Steve a lot of comments. I just wanted to touch base on what Councilmember Clark said and what Councilmember Ottenberg briefly mentioned earlier about where we see ourselves. I think part of the problem with finding direction is that we have such a high turnover rate. There's a lot of us, and our positions are for 2 years, and we come in with different opinions that shake everything up. And I can tell you this is a drastically different opinion base than what I've seen before in my short time on council. And so all of that contributes to not knowing which way to go, because sometimes we get a path lined out pretty quickly, and then a group comes in and says, nope, I want to go the opposite way, and then staff is left to pick up the pieces, and that's stressful for them, and it makes it harder for whoever fills out a position. And then finally, where we want to go will also be dictated by the regional forces around us, which Scott touched on, right? So we may saw ourselves with a lot more room to develop physical space, but when other communities are bordering on unbridled development, you end up with a lot of market saturation, and it makes it really hard to have a duplication of services 5 miles away, 2 miles away, 1 mile away. And so some of what we want to be will be affected by outside forces that we just can't fix, and so we'll have to consider that. So I think we had a good discussion. Okay, Councilmember Dodwell.
I just want to make sure that, I mean, we went through our 5-year plan that we worked on very diligently. And I want to make sure that we take that 5-year plan and tie some of those goals back to what we would expect out of a person that we would be adding into those things. Or into this position. Maybe at our next meeting, we can go back and take a look at, here's our 5-year goals. What impacts can economic development have on various areas? And how does that impact the job description? Or maybe that's something that Mr. Cross should do on his own. I'm not quite sure how we can go about doing that, but I think there's been somewhat of a disconnect between goals that we've framed out, because we're just now starting to really do that on a regular basis, and the positions that we want to put into place to support those goals. So
when you say, sorry to interrupt, but when you say goals, you mean that economic development guide we were in the middle of updating? That 5-year goal. Okay.
That was a 5-year goal. But if you just look at the overall, one of the things that our first economic development manager did when he got into the position that he was in, was he looked at what does the city of Wildwood want to be in 5 years and 10 years? And he tried to get some definition on that, so that he knew what goals he needed to set forth for himself, as the council or this committee was struggling to even put together some of that. So I think we can't lose sight of that document that we spent so much time the first half of the year putting together and developing and determining how do we use someone in this position to help support those goals that we have overall for the city, and what components out of that need to be assigned to this position to help define the type of person that we need in this position. Just a thought.
Good point, Councilmember. City Administrator, you're now also a council member, City Administrator Cross.
No, I don't want to be a council member. You guys work way too hard. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about what Councilmember Clark and what Councilmember Dodwell said, because it echoes what I had said at the beginning of when I spoke earlier. Is it behooves us, all of us, the entire council, to know where we are going to be able to make the correct hire. Again, it doesn't do us any one of us any good if we assume where we think we're going and we hire somebody and then that person's hands are handcuffed. So, which is why I'm trying to gather as much input as I can, because certainly this is not a decision I'm making in a vacuum by any stretch. So I need as much input as I can from the entire council of where they see development going and how this person can help. We do have our 8 strategic goals, and that definitely helps. And that's going to be our roadmap. The budgets will make sure that we stay on track to our strategic goals. But then there's the economic development plan, that 5-year economic, that guide, the economic development guide. But if that guide is not in parallel to our 8 strategic goals, then that was a huge waste of time. And I don't believe that it is a waste of time, but certainly we all need to make sure that the two are in tandem. But right now, I will tell you, I am at a loss to know exactly what our elected officials and our mayor wants to do going forward for the next 2, 3, 5 years in terms of economic development. I don't know, and I'm trying to ascertain that to help make a prudent hiring decision here. With regards to staff, Councilmember Jaxie talked about it and others talked about it. I will tell you that, and I know you all have heard me say this before. I mean, there isn't anybody that is a bigger proponent to the staff than me. I have supported them. I have stood out in front of them and taken the arrows, and I do everything I can to protect the staff from you all and the mayor from piling on. It is my intention for the 2022 budget to try to put in some additional staff where I believe that it is needed. We'll all see how the numbers shake out, because we don't have any huge revenue streams of discretionary income. We have the ARPA money coming, but that's already earmarked. We have hopefully infrastructure money coming, but that's probably earmarked as well. So I don't know. And again, there's not any huge increases in our sales tax pool. So barring any additional taxes, and there doesn't seem to be a real desire to implement new taxes right now, my hands are tied a bit in terms of what I can do. Doesn't prevent me from trying, but at the end of the day, I have to see how the numbers shake out and what the desires of our officials are in terms of balanced budgets, reserves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you've all lived this and you know where I'm coming from. So I hear what you're saying about having a communications person. I've had many discussions with my directors in terms of trying to take things off of their shoulders. Joe has got Travis doing things that are not part of a senior planner's position. Joe himself is doing the e-newsletter, and I've tried to take that away from him a number of times. That is not something that I want a director of planning to be working on, to be honest. We have an outside party who's doing some work. So Julian was doing some work, in terms of that. I'm trying to get that off of the people where it doesn't belong and put it on the shoulders of people where it does belong, be it existing staff or new. So everything you all said, I can assure you I've thought about. The input though and the support from you all is very, very much appreciated. I can't tell you how much it's appreciated. So we got 27 people here and we're trying to run this doggone city, and it's pretty damn tough, I got to tell you.
Understandable. Councilmember Galani.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on what some of the other folks had said, regarding kind of what we're envisioning with this position. I think, first of all, I would say that just from my limited experience and short time on the council so far, I would say that we were probably spoiled with as good of a job as Julian did for a city like Wildwood. And I think it was great. He was awesome. But I think, we also have to keep in mind that when we look at development and trying to bring in all these, professional businesses like we're talking about, it's just, we're at a different disadvantage to our neighboring municipalities. Chair Edens, you brought up that point a little while ago, and those outside forces do have an impact on who we can attract and how we can attract them. And so I think we're more limited to the small mom and pop operations or satellite insurance companies or small eateries and that kind of thing. And, part of our city and kind of what we want to be is more of a rural municipality. I mean, we've got our limited lot size requirements, and which, creates a significant limitations in the growth of residents and population. And so it's kind of like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say we're going to keep ourselves rural and do all these things and be a park community, but we also want to attract big business and grow our revenue streams from that standpoint too. So I think it's just, we have to realize kind of exactly what we want, like we talked about. And then kind of, I can tell you that from a business standpoint, being in the business community, Wildwood is known as a very difficult municipality to work with when it comes to development, from a developer standpoint and other businesses. So we don't really have the most friendly reputation out there in the business community. So I think Julian's done a great job at overcoming some of those obstacles and attracting some folks that maybe we wouldn't have. So that's the kind of person I think we need, is somebody who does have that sales mentality that can literally be an advocate on behalf of the city and then try to attract some of those folks.
Thank you. Very good points. I'm going to add one more thing, and then we're going to move on. I think we've had a good discussion, and we're going to stay on track with time. But I also think the memberships in professional organizations like IEDC, or being a certified economic developer is a boon and should be encouraged as well. Okay, so moving on, we have a for information item under other updates. I went to the West St. Louis Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs and Transportation Forum. I will acknowledge that the notes are not the best. Essentially, the participants get up and speak, and I wrote as quickly as I could and then typed them up later. So it is probable that some things were missed, but I did the best I could. So does anybody have any questions on that update? So the West St. Louis Chamber, just so you know, has general membership meetings. So those are for really the businesses that want to be a part of that. And then this is a quarterly event, and it's good for coordination between resources, which is why the police departments and fire departments were there, but also businesses that then you get to hear about the business landscape through the actual cities, and kind of what those updates are. And we briefly touched on so the veteran potential event with the wall last night at council. And as you know, we have the Veterans Business Program. I just wanted you guys to be aware, again, the city of Manchester has their flags of valor that's going to be installed as a memorial to 9/11. They are still looking for volunteers. Those are big flags. I think they're about 7 feet tall, so they're not the little yard ones by any means. They have a Veterans Commission. I've talked to their mayor several times. We go to church together, and I've attended veterans events with him. In the future, if we ever wanted to maybe offer to cost share with a joint event, they would be the city to do that. And so if that's something the city administrator and Mr. Vunich want to look into as well, and when we touch base on our budget chair committee, then this might be a good city to coordinate. So I did want to make sure you knew that there was an opportunity to go to what will be a very touching park display. So if there's no other questions, comments, or concerns, yes, Councilmember Dodwell.
I'm sorry to be such a pain here.
Oh, you're all right.
I was just thinking, it popped into my head. We did the snowman thing last year. Are we hoping to do it again this year, or are we going to table it since we do not have Julian? Did we find, I don't know that we ever assessed what the true benefit was out of doing it. I heard lots of positives, no negatives, but I just thought I'd ask.
Well, so I met with Mr. Cross and I met with Julian before he left to kind of get a landscape of what I needed to help pick up the slack on. And one of those things I need to do is I'm going to set up a meeting and talk to the WBA president. They're in a little bit of a transition right now, so hopefully I'll be able to kind of get a hold of them is my understanding of some scuttlebutt. So I'm looking to, reschedule in whatever COVID-friendly form that will be in several months down the line, the Holiday Winter Fest, and that would include talking to the businesses about the snowman search, the painting of the downtown windows, potentially doing a gingerbread contest as well with the tree lighting. If not, my understanding is we would just go back to that Adopt the Tree business program. So I'll try to find out more, if they are still interested in the snowman search or not, and come back to you guys with that, and then a date to reschedule the lawn and garden summit. That'll be another email chain. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, TBD. I will say with the pandemic, it does feel like I'm only planning 1 month in advance, and I'm sure staff feels like that too. It's very stressful. Any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, I'll take a motion to close. Made by Councilmember Ottenberg, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, well, thanks for coming tonight and participating and sharing your opinions, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, Chair Edens.
Thanks.
Night all.
Thank you.
Mr. Cross, thank you for your background information too.
And if it seemed like if it
Appreciate
seemed
it.
like, sorry, it cut out and then I jumped in, and then it cut out and then I jumped